Grief and Loss Workshop. My name is Mahira Zakyuddin, and I have been with WSO since the past 5 years. I am the primary school counselor, and I'm joined by my colleagues. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Rupa, and I'm part of the counseling team of our wonderful team, and it's really a great privilege to be here today and to talk to everyone.
Hi, I'm Miss Kapoor, and I'm also one of the counselors in the primary department. And it's been a pleasure and been wonderful working with this team. And I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. So, just a few housekeeping notes. Before we begin, I wanted to just talk about grief, and I found this image to be quite powerful, and what they've said in it, that those who understand it do not need a definition, and those who do not understand it, we could not explain grief with any definition. And that is very true with what our experience has been as school counselors. A few housekeeping sessions is that this is a recorded session, and as there are people who are going to be present, we ask them to keep their mic and video off. Some of the content can be triggering. So if at any point in time you feel after listening to this video triggered, you can always reach out to us. And there is an opportunity for you to ask questions. You can reach out on our emails, which will be available towards the end of this presentation. So, talking about grief, in very simple terms, it is the feeling when we experience loss. It is natural, it is overwhelming, and there can be a multiple number of ways in which grief is experienced. Some of it feels visceral, and some of it is emotional. All of those experiences are normal. And for you to know that the more significant the loss, the more significant will be the response. For grief, the experience has shown that at many times people will use analogies to describe it, and many times it's been described as the ocean, and it's described as waves of grief. Other phrases that have been used are, again, referring to the ocean. And it's just a way to give language to our experience and feelings, which is an important part of processing grief. There are different types of grief that you can experience. Typically, it's assumed that when it is experienced most when there is a loss of a loved one or if there is a bereavement. But in reality, grief can occur in many, many ways. And a small list, and this is by no means exhaustive, is available to you on the screen. Now, social scientists and grief experts have spent a lot of research and time trying to understand grief. And what many have come to the conclusion is 6 stages of grief. These are by no means linear. They are actually circular. And they can also move from one stage to stage 3. So you can jump from different points. So for example, you may move from denial to sadness, or from acceptance back to anger. But predominantly, these 6 are the stages of grief. And it can look very different. So some examples of how denial can look is there is avoidance and confusion, there's shock and fear, and sometimes even elation. People might choose to engage in odd behavior as a form of avoidance as well. So they might decide to celebrate or focus on joy and not on the grief that has happened. And that is normally around denial. Again, anger, which is known as an iceberg emotion, can have a number of other things that are going on. So it could be frustration, irritation, anxiety. There's sadness, and sadness is not just weeping, but sadness is also the experience of being overwhelmed or helpless. There can be hostility. Bargaining as a stage is when we are negotiating and we are trying to see that what it was before, what is now, and what will be. And it's trying to find the balance. And usually, bargaining is a stage that is before acceptance. Acceptance was previously known as the last stage for grief. However, David Kessler, who is one of the grief specialists and a social scientist, has been able to add a sixth stage, which is meaning. And acceptance is submission into what has happened and trying to grip with what will be. Meaning is more thriving. It's moving forward with hope and direction. So these are the six stages of grief that people usually or typically go through.
Absolutely. And I think, as you can see, grief is one word or an emotion that we often think of as one. But as you can see, there's so much encompassed in that one emotion, as in how it's directly impacting on one's daily lives and functioning. And this is a very significant study that's been done by Harvard University Center on the Developing Child, which focuses on child bereavement in general. And we can go through the graph and I can run you through it. If you notice the green dotted line, so that is the optimum healthy development. So it indicates where one is maybe in a space of good health, having good relationships, or successful profession, and in school, the learning in school. And then the dark blue arrow downwards, that indicates how it can actually push one's well-being down when there is a grief-related adversity, which could be all the things that Mahira mentioned before. It could be a loss of a dear one, and it can be any loss and grief. And what it impacts is shown as the zigzagged disrupted development red line, where it clearly indicates how grief related adversity can have an impact negatively on your well being. It could result in mental health concerns. It can have a clear drop in your academic performance. It could be creating a very low self worth in the person, and it can even create a fatal or early mortality. And now we have the light blue, which is the point of discussion from our end, how care and protection can actually cushion up and bring the person's well-being back up when he's or she is experiencing grief. This could be a community support, having somebody very close to you, and how we can help the person to have coping skills, which we will discuss in further and in detail in the coming presentation. But it's just a clear study on how it's directly impacting on one's well-being and mental health. And now we have one additional layer added on to the experience of grief and loss in the past 1 year, which is the pandemic and the context of COVID-19. So if again, like I will invite you to have a look at the graphic image here and reflect on our own experience of grief and loss. Maybe take a moment to reflect on what it could be, even something that as simple as having a hug, giving a hug, being able to see each other's smiles, to all the losses that was also mentioned before. So definitely the COVID context adds a very deeper and complex layer to the experience of grief and loss.
Thank you, Rupa. So, absolutely, that the COVID and the pandemic has created an added layer to our grief and loss. And there have been many people who have lost a loved one during this pandemic. These are some of the things that you can do if you haven't had this experience. And these are recommendations by the CDC from the United States. The recommendation is that we continue to connect with other people. As human beings, we are social animals, and it is part of our neurology and our culture to connect. So, which is why many faith traditions have the opportunity for people to come together as a bereavement happens. With COVID, this is hard, and therefore there is an added layer of moving into isolation or loneliness. So I would encourage you to either use technology and connect with people by hosting a conference calls or sharing videos and pictures of the person who has passed away. And you can also coordinate Zoom meetings or team meetings or virtual meetings, any kind of platform to honor the loved ones virtually. Another thing that helps process grief is memory. Oftentimes, people think that if you were to forget, it will be okay. But actually, what research has shown is that when we are able to develop memories and dig deep in those memories, that is more healing. So it would be good for you to try and develop a virtual memory book. There are lots of apps. There are a lot of social media applications that are encouraging this. You can also take part in an activity as planting a tree or connecting with nature as your faith tradition permits you to create a memory in honor of the person who's passed away. And the third biggest thing that has been recommended is to ask for support. Ideally, you can ask for grief counseling. However, if you feel that you're not ready for that, and if you are from a faith tradition, seek spiritual support. And also seek support from trusted community leaders. There may be people within your community, which is your family or friends, or even your work, where there may be people you can talk to about your experience. Because remember, connection is key to healing. Now, if you are someone who is actually going through loss and not exactly bereavement, it is very important for you to acknowledge your loss and grief and find ways to express that. You know, some people are good at art, some people are good at listening to music, some people are good at blogging or gardening. There needs to be a way of expressing your grief and loss. It's also important for you to consider new rituals. Things have changed, and we've used the word new normal. So find ways in which you can fill the gaps that you are feeling from that loss. And what I would encourage you, the third factor, which is stay in the here and now. It is so important that we try and do grounding exercises every day. And it could be very simple exercises. A simple Google search of grounding exercises for meditation, you will be able to find a number of strategies that you can use to help you heal from the loss that you're experiencing.
And as we were going through different ways of dealing with grief when we experience it, I think we often wonder how we could support someone else. What can we do? How could we support? And the key word there, I think, is empathy, which we all know to some extent, maybe about what that means. Maybe we don't know what that means. So, empathy and a little wordings on that. Let me hold the door for you. I may have never walked a mile in your shoes, but I can see that your soles are worn and your strength is torn. Under the weight of a story I have never lived before. So let me hold the door for you. After all you have walked through, it's the least I can do. And I think that really says it all, how we can be there. Moving on to empathy. What is empathy? And it's just a very open ended, non judgmental space where you can just be with the person, and all you have to do is listen and let that person know that I'm there and you are not alone. So, just taking a moment to remember what that means. Whenever you feel in a fix, how can I support my dear one? Or how can I support my colleague or my friend? And this is again to support all of us. When there's that moment and you really want to offer a support verbally, and this is again to support all of us. When there's that moment and you really want to offer a support verbally, it is so important to be mindful and authentic and genuine. So if the way to say is, sometimes I think no, automatically we might say, I know just what you're going through. So the thought behind that is, you might not know exactly what that person is going through because everyone's experience of grief is unique. Instead, we can say, can you tell me more about what this has been like for you? So we sit in the space of empathy and ask that person, what does that mean for you and how does it feel for you? Another one would be, you must be incredibly angry. So again, it comes maybe from a place of good intention, but it's also telling that person what that person should or must feel. But then people in grief often feel different things in different times. So we could actually say most people have very intense and deep emotions when you experience grief. So what is it like for you? Going on to, sometimes we might say it's hard, but important to remember the good things. I know, I think in those maybe less mindful moments, that's one thing that comes internally for us to share with that person. Again, we want to validate that person's emotions and grief. So instead, we could actually say, what memories do you have about that person? Or what do you remember about the job that you had? What do you miss about it? And the key one not to say is at least. At least he's no longer in pain. And I think it's so, so important to be mindful when you're sharing a space with a person who has experienced, especially bereavement or loss of a loved one, not to minimize that person's unique experience. But what can we say instead? What sort of things, or what do you remember about your loved one? I'm here to listen. So just trying to share some of the things that we can communicate whenever you are trying to comfort your loved one or dear one. You can have a look at it. We will be sharing all these
Rupa,
slides with you. Yeah.
I'm getting a call from Nathan, so I'm just
Mhm.
going to take that, okay?
Yeah. This is one more resource for you to again resort to whenever you want to and you're confused about how exactly or what could I say to someone who is experiencing grief. You can say, I will help you. I hear you, the very powerful one. I'm listening and tell me about it. So, again, evoking the emotion of empathy, it's being there beside and giving that space to listen and to share.
Thank you, Rupa. And like for what you shared, that how important it is to build that muscle around the vocabulary regarding grief and loss, and how important it is for us to be mindful with what we share and how we speak to our loved ones, because we want to be there for them. And it can be very, very hard to know how to console a friend and how to be there for that relative who's grieving. And sometimes you feel that you can't do anything about it, and it's important then that we don't give up, and we know that we can't take that pain away. It is really a painful journey for them, but the fact that you are there for them and your presence is so much more important than anything else. And the more we are aware that we cannot fix things for them, the more realization we have that it is their journey and they are going through that. But all you can do is to be present for them. And this is a little slide we wanted to share on the different ways in which we can reach out to our loved ones. And we don't need to be perfect, but we can be present. And in that, there are these little things that matters, and it's important that we reach out to them, understanding that they are going through their grief. It is a whirlwind for them. It is not an easy space. So every small gesture that you make, any support, even listening, can be a source of comfort to your friend. Remember that you being bringing that empathy within yourself and reaching out to your friend or the loved one, it is important that you are very flexible and giving them the space to grieve. And you could reach out with any way you want. It could be making something for them, you could call them for checking in, or sometimes you can just let them be. And as we have mentioned earlier, it is very important that we are able to bring those memories out with all the emotions that we have felt as a human being. The moment we say the names of our loved ones who have passed away, it gives us the strength, it gives us more courage to bear the amazing journey that we've had with them. So it's very important that we do not shy away from saying their names. The other very important aspect of this puzzle is managing grief for ourselves. Because in that space, when we are in grief and loss, it is really very hard to be discerning because we are feeling so many emotions. It's like a bowl of soup which has everything in it, and you don't know what and when what will surface. So, just like for others, when we reach out, we have empathy. It is really very important that we see ourselves with self compassion and understanding that we give so easily to others, and to realize that wherever we are is the place to be. There is no right place and there is no wrong place. There is no judgment here. The way you handle is your unique journey of life, and that is how you are going to handle it. And give yourself the space and the understanding that you will reach wherever you are meant to reach for yourself.
If you have watched this video, please take a moment to complete our feedback form and give us your feedback. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, any of the members of the counseling team. Here are our email addresses, and you can also follow us on Instagram. Thank you, and have a safe and healthy day.